Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you here. It is often in the most ordinary of days that something extraordinary unfolds, almost as though life itself conspires to surprise us. Imagine, if you will, a quiet street on a golden afternoon, the air heavy with the fragrance of blossoms that had only just opened to the warmth of the season. She walked with no particular urgency, only a gentle rhythm in her steps, her thoughts occupied with the trivialities that so often fill our minds. Perhaps she was recalling an errand she had nearly forgotten, or perhaps she was merely content to wander, her heart unburdened by expectation. And yet, as fate delights in doing, her path was not to remain solitary for long. From the other side came a young gentleman, equally unaware that his steps carried him toward a moment that would alter everything. His stride was steady, confident in appearance, though his mind, much like hers, was full of the small concerns of the day. He might have been thinking of some work left undone, or of a conversation he hoped to avoid, but he carried himself with a kind of careless ease, as though the world had never once demanded too much of him. And then, as though the universe itself decided to draw two separate lines into one, their eyes met. There was nothing grand about that first glance. It did not thunder like a storm or blaze like fire. It was quieter, subtler, the kind of look that lingers in the heart, not because of its noise, but because of its stillness. It was as if each recognized something familiar in the other, though neither could yet name what it was. Their steps slowed, uncertain whether politeness should urge them to pass with nothing more than a nod, or whether courage might persuade them to pause. She offered a small smile, hesitant yet genuine, and he returned it with a look that carried both curiosity and warmth. Words came almost reluctantly, as if both feared to disturb the fragile magic that had sprung between them. He asked, with the ease of someone accustomed to speaking when silence felt too heavy, whether she often walked this way. She answered softly, admitting that she did, though only when her thoughts pressed her toward fresh air. It was not the question itself, nor the answer, that held weight, but rather the way in which their voices seemed to fit together, as though they had been meant to converse long before either had known the other existed. The moments that followed stretched like threads of silk, delicate and glimmering. A simple exchange about the weather, a passing remark about the beauty of the day, yet beneath these plain words there was a current neither could ignore. With every sentence their eyes revealed more than their lips dared confess. Her heart quickened, though she knew not why, and his chest carried a quiet thrill he would not have admitted even to himself. There are times when we meet another and feel nothing more than courtesy, and then there are rare instances when the soul is stirred, awakened by a presence it cannot easily dismiss. This was such a moment. Neither spoke of it aloud, of course, for to name such a feeling so early would have seemed almost improper, but both knew, in that silent agreement that requires no words, that something had begun. She noticed the way his voice softened when he addressed her, as though he feared to break a fragile shell. He observed the brightness in her eyes, that flicker of light that seemed to emerge not only from the sun above, but from something within her spirit. These were not discoveries made with deliberate effort. They were revelations that arrived unbidden, as natural as breathing. And when at last the encounter drew to its inevitable close, when courtesy required them to part and resume their separate paths, there lingered a hesitation neither wished to break. It was a pause filled with hope, with the unspoken desire that this chance meeting might not be their last. He bowed his head slightly, offering her the respect due to a lady, and she inclined her own with a grace that carried both modesty and quiet promise. Then, with reluctant steps, they moved away from one another, each carrying within their hearts a spark that had not been there before. Though the world around them remained unchanged, though the street lay quiet and the blossoms swayed just as they had before, they walked away knowing that something had shifted within themselves. A single meeting, unplanned and unanticipated, had planted the seed of a story yet to unfold. And so it is with such moments, simple, fleeting, yet powerful enough to awaken a soul, that we must remind ourselves to take pride in what our hearts are willing to feel, for in that pride lies the beginning of love. Love, though tender in its beginnings, does not unfold in a world untouched by duty or desire. No sooner do two hearts find one another than they discover the weight of all that surrounds them. Ambitions long cherished, responsibilities that cannot be ignored, and the quiet, persistent voice of selfhood that whispers of who they are meant to become. Such was the path for them, our young lady and gentleman, who, though delighted by the spark of their first encounter, soon realized that affection alone does not shield one from life's demands. She was a woman of dreams, her heart set not only on companionship, but also on accomplishments that belonged wholly to herself. From her earliest years, she had yearned for more than the simple pleasures of idle days. Her mind was alive with ideas, her spirit restless with the desire to prove that she could stand upon her own, even in a world that so often asked women to be content with less. To her, love was precious, but it must never serve as a chain that bound her hands or silenced her voice. He too carried his own aspirations, though of a different nature. His family had long relied upon him, and duty pressed heavily upon his shoulders. His work demanded late hours and steadfast commitment, leaving him torn between the call of responsibility and the pull of the heart. He longed for her company, craved her laughter, and yet, in the silence of the night, he often asked himself whether his devotion to his obligations might one day estrange him from the woman who had so unexpectedly captured his soul. And so between them grew not distance of affection, but a subtle tension, a question neither could easily answer. How may two people pursue love without surrendering themselves? Their time together was often filled with sweetness, walks along shaded lanes, conversations that lingered until twilight, but behind every smile lay an awareness of the other's battles. She feared that her own determination might seem selfish, that he would believe her heart to be less devoted. He, in turn, feared that his endless commitments might seem neglectful, that she would imagine herself unloved. It is in such struggles that love proves its true worth. For what is affection if it cannot weather the storm of competing desires? They quarreled at times not from malice but from longing to be understood. She wished he might see the value of her dreams, that they were not in opposition to their union, but rather a foundation upon which her happiness was built. He wished she might know the depth of his devotion, even when duty drew him away, even when his words of reassurance fell short of calming her uncertainty. Yet in these moments of friction, they discovered something far greater than either had anticipated, the capacity to listen. He began to see that her ambitions were not a rival to his love, but an expression of her very being, and to cherish her meant to cherish all she desired to achieve. She, in turn, began to understand that his dedication to his family and work was not a rejection of her, but a reflection of the honor he carried in all things. Slowly, they learned to balance, to bend without breaking, to honor one another's pursuits even when it meant setting aside their own. There were sacrifices, to be sure. She sometimes laid aside her pen when his voice called for her company, and he sometimes left his duties waiting so he might walk with her beneath the stars. Neither gave up entirely what they loved, but both found room to weave their lives together with patience. It was not the perfection of circumstance that allowed them to continue, but the willingness to believe that two hearts could beat strongly even when their paths did not run in perfect harmony. And is this not the lesson of all enduring love? That it is not the absence of difficulty which sustains affection, but the courage to persist in spite of it, to be proud not only of loving another but of remaining true to oneself, and yet still choosing each day to stand beside the one who makes the world feel less lonely. So it was with them. Their dreams remained, their differences endured, but love did not falter. Instead, it grew deeper, richer, because it was tested, because it required them to rise above fear and selfishness. And, in learning this balance, they discovered that pride and love need not be enemies, but partners in the quiet art of building a life together. There comes a time in every affection, however tender its beginnings, when shadows arise to question what seemed so certain. For two hearts joined in fondness are not free from the frailties of human nature. Insecurity, that quiet intruder, often slips between them, whispering doubts where once there was only trust. Fear, too, lingers at the threshold, asking whether love is strong enough to endure what life may demand. So it was with them, our young pair, who, despite the sweetness of their bond, found themselves unsettled by moments when certainty faltered. She began to wonder, in the silence of nights spent alone while he labored late, if his heart was truly with her, or if it had been claimed by the endless duties that called him away. Though she reminded herself of his kindness, his warm words, his every gesture of devotion, still her mind played cruel tricks. A look that seemed distracted, an unanswered question, the pause before he spoke. These small things grew large in her imagination, convincing her that his love might be slipping, little by little, beyond her reach. He, too, was not immune to the tyranny of doubt. Though she had assured him of her affection, though her eyes shone with tenderness whenever they met, still he wondered if her ambitions might carry her farther than his presence could follow. He questioned whether her dreams, so noble and fiercely pursued, might one day leave him behind as a memory of what was, rather than a companion in what could be. A careless remark, a day when she seemed lost in thought, the brief absence of her smile, these became heavy in his heart, for fear often magnifies what truth would have dismissed. And so they struggled, not with one another directly, but with the voices within themselves that sought to shake their confidence. They did not quarrel loudly, nor exchange bitter words, for theirs was not a love marked by cruelty. Rather, they endured the subtler pains, the silences that lasted too long, the hesitations before a confession, the way they turned from one another when courage failed to guide their tongues. It is in such moments, when love feels most fragile, that hearts must learn whether they will cling to fear or reach for trust. She asked herself whether pride might be her undoing, whether her refusal to speak openly of her worries would cost her the very affection she longed to preserve. He, in turn, wondered whether patience alone could assure her of his devotion, or whether he must dare to expose his own insecurities, even at the risk of appearing weak. There is a peculiar cruelty in silence, for though it intends to protect, it often deepens the wound it seeks to hide. And yet, within that silence, love still lingered. It waited for the moment when one of them would be brave enough to speak the truth plainly, to confess the fear that weighed so heavily upon the heart. When at last she confessed that she sometimes feared his absence meant indifference, he was struck not by anger but by sorrow that she had endured such thoughts alone. And when he admitted his dread that her ambitions might carry her far from him, she felt not insulted but moved, for his confession revealed the depth of his longing to remain at her side. In that exchange they discovered that doubt, when spoken honestly, need not destroy. Rather, it may draw two souls closer, for in revealing our weakness, we invite another to offer their strength. Her fears were soothed not by grand promises, but by his steady assurance that his absence was not neglect but necessity, and that every moment away only deepened his desire to return. His worries eased not by her abandoning her dreams, but by her vow that love need not be sacrificed upon the altar of ambition, and that her victories would mean little if he were not there to share them. Thus they came to see that doubt is not the end of love, but a test of it, for love is not proven in the ease of happy days, but in the endurance of troubled ones. To be proud of loving another is to face the fears that arise, and yet choose to believe in what the heart has already known to be true. And so their bond, though shaken by insecurity, was not broken. Instead, it grew more resilient, strengthened by the courage to face uncertainty together rather than apart. For love that survives doubt is love made firmer, and in overcoming those shadows, they found a light that shone brighter than before. Growth is seldom gentle, for it demands from us a courage that often feels greater than our strength. To love another while pursuing one's own path is no simple matter, for the world delights in convincing us that one must be chosen over the other. Yet love is not meant to suffocate dreams, nor are dreams intended to cast aside love. The truest strength lies in the daring to hold both, even when the weight seems impossible. For her, this truth arrived with startling clarity on a day when she stood before an opportunity she had long desired, one that promised fulfillment but required her to step beyond the comfort of what she had always known. She feared that in reaching for it, she might risk the harmony she had so carefully nurtured with him. What if her success appeared to him as distance? What if ambition built a wall he could not climb? These questions pressed upon her heart until doubt nearly convinced her to turn away. But then she recalled the look in his eyes, that quiet plea for her to remain true not only to him but to herself. It was then she understood. To choose love without choosing her dreams would not make her worthy of admiration, nor would it make her truly happy. He, too, was pressed to grow. His life had long been dictated by responsibility, each day measured by what he could give to others rather than what he might claim for himself. Yet he began to see that to stand forever in duty without reaching for his own joy was to live half a life. He loved her deeply, but he knew that unless he honored his own passions, he could not stand beside her with pride. And so, with a heart that trembled though it stood firm, he began to carve out moments not for obligation alone, but for the things that awakened his spirit. Their journey was not marked by dramatic defiance, but by the quiet bravery of daily choices. She learned to speak openly of her ambitions, to invite him into her dreams rather than hide them away. He learned to step back when necessary, to allow her the space to rise, even if it meant watching from the side as she reached heights he could only admire. In turn, she cherished his devotion not as a shackle but as a foundation that steadied her when fear threatened to undo her resolve. Together, they began to understand that love was not a chain to be worn, but a root from which growth could flourish. There were moments, of course, when the courage required seemed too great. When exhaustion left them weary, when criticism from others planted seeds of doubt, when the temptation to retreat into easier, safer choices whispered seductively in their ears. Yet time and again they chose to resist. She pursued her path with boldness, not as one who wished to outshine him, but as one who wished to shine alongside him. He supported her not from the shadows, but with a strength that matched her own, reminding her that she need not walk alone. And in return, she encouraged him to seek joy beyond duty, to rediscover parts of himself he had long neglected. There is a kind of beauty in the courage to grow, for it reshapes not only the lives of those who embrace it, but also the love that binds them. Where once they might have feared that ambition and affection could not exist together, they now saw how each nourished the other. Her triumphs became his pride, and his perseverance became her inspiration. In this way, they discovered that love is not diminished by growth, but enriched by it, becoming deeper and more enduring because both had chosen to rise. In their shared courage, they found a new rhythm to life. A rhythm where love and dreams were no longer in competition, but in harmony, guiding them forward into a future they were building hand in hand. And though the world might still have doubted them, they no longer doubted themselves, for they had chosen not only each other, but also the fullness of who they were meant to be. And so they stood, not as two souls afraid to lose one another, but as two who knew that true love is never lost when one dares to grow. There comes a moment in every story of the heart when decisions must be made, not the small, passing choices of daily life, but those weighty ones that shape the very course of a future. For what is love, if not tested by the courage to choose rightly, even when the path is uncertain? To love with sincerity is not merely to follow the pull of affection, but to act in ways that honor the heart while preserving the dignity of the soul. It is here that they found themselves, standing at the crossroads where love and self-respect demanded equal attention. She had long believed that to remain true to him, she must at times set aside her own desires. Yet she began to realize that such sacrifice, when repeated without thought, could leave her diminished, no longer the vibrant woman who had first caught his eye. To choose him while denying herself was not love, it was surrender, and so she resolved that she would not shrink from her ambitions, nor allow her voice to soften into silence. For what worth has affection, if it demands the erasure of the very qualities that inspired it? She knew she must stand proudly in her truth, even if it risked unsettling the harmony between them. He, too, faced choices of his own. The duties that had long bound him called persistently, urging him to continue as he always had, pouring himself out for others until little remained for himself or for her. Yet he could no longer ignore the quiet ache that warned him of the cost. To honor his love for her meant he must also honor himself, refusing to let duty consume him entirely. Choosing her did not mean abandoning responsibility, but it did mean creating boundaries, drawing lines where before there had been none, and allowing himself to step into a future built not only on obligation, but also on joy. These were not easy choices. Each carried risk, for to assert one's truth in love is to invite misunderstanding, even conflict. There were moments when he mistook her determination for distance, fearing that her insistence on following her path meant she cared less for him. There were times when she doubted his sincerity, wondering if his hesitation to release certain responsibilities was a sign that she came second. Yet through these uncertainties they pressed forward, for they knew that love built upon compromise of soul cannot endure. In the quiet conversations that stretched late into the night, they began to name their fears aloud. She confessed that she would not feel proud of herself if she gave up her dreams for the sake of pleasing him. And he, though wounded at first, came to see that her honesty was an act of love, for it showed she wished to remain her truest self by his side. He admitted that his sense of duty often weighed heavier than he could bear, and though it shamed him to say so, he revealed that he longed for her understanding. She, hearing this, felt her heart swell with tenderness, for his admission was not weakness but strength, proof that he trusted her enough to be vulnerable. Thus, their proud choices were not selfish, nor were they reckless. They were deliberate, guided by respect for one another and for themselves. She chose to walk forward in her ambitions, but with her hand extended, inviting him to share in her victories. He chose to set limits to his obligations, carving space where their love might thrive, without shame for tending to his own happiness. In this balance, they discovered that love does not diminish when it is tested by strong wills. Instead, it grows more steadfast, for it is rooted in authenticity rather than pretense. For the truest pride is not arrogance, but the quiet confidence that one has acted in accordance with both love and conscience. It is the knowledge that choices made were not for the sake of pleasing others, nor for the easy comfort of avoiding conflict, but for the preservation of dignity and the nurturing of affection. And in this they found peace, not the fragile peace of silence and submission, but the lasting peace of two souls who had chosen rightly for themselves and for one another. And so their story advanced, built not on sacrifice that diminished, but on choices that uplifted, leaving them able to stand together with heads unbowed and hearts unashamed. There is a beauty in love that endures not because it is free of trials, but because it has weathered them with grace. When two souls dare to meet, to dream, to stumble, and yet to rise again, they create not only a story for themselves, but also a light that others may follow. Their love, shaped by choice and strengthened by courage, became such a light, a reminder that affection need not weaken one's spirit, but can instead call forth the best that lies within. For her, the journey revealed that love was never meant to confine. She stood proud, knowing that her heart had found a companion who admired her strength rather than feared it, who celebrated her triumphs instead of envying them, who understood that her ambition was not a rival to their affection, but a part of what made her whole. And in standing firm, she discovered something even greater, that her example could stir others to believe in themselves as well. Friends looked upon her with new respect, not only for the love she cherished, but for the way she carried it, with dignity, independence, and warmth. For him, the journey revealed that love was not a burden to bear, but a gift that freed him from the chains of unending obligation. In choosing to honor himself alongside his devotion to her, he found joy he had long denied. He learned that strength is not measured by sacrifice alone, but by the wisdom to guard one's own happiness, so that it may be shared more fully with another. His steadfastness, once admired merely as duty, was now admired as love that balanced care for others with care for the self. And in this, he became a figure of quiet inspiration, a man unafraid to reveal both his devotion and his vulnerability. Together, they became more than lovers bound by circumstance. They became companions in the truest sense, partners who lifted each other higher, who saw in one another not only what was but what could be. Their love did not demand silence or submission. It invited growth, laughter, resilience, and pride. It was not perfect, nor did they pretend it to be. Rather, it was real, woven with honesty, with hard choices, with forgiveness when pride had cut too deeply, and with tenderness that healed what fear had once broken. And is this not the kind of love the world most needs? A love that does not diminish either soul, but enriches both. A love that is proud without arrogance, humble without weakness, tender without fragility. It is the kind of love that teaches others, even those far removed, that it is possible to embrace affection without surrendering identity, to walk beside another without losing one's own path. When friends asked of their secret, they had no grand speech to offer, no perfect formula to explain. They simply said that love is a choice renewed each day, and that pride is not the enemy of affection but its guardian, for when one is proud of who they are, and when one is proud to stand beside another, then no doubt, no fear, no difference can undo the bond. It is in this daily choosing, in quiet mornings and in long nights, that love proves itself strongest. Their story, though personal and intimate, reached beyond themselves. It stirred whispers among those who had nearly given up on love, reminding them that devotion and individuality can coexist. It gave courage to others who had long silenced their ambitions for the sake of acceptance, showing that true affection would never demand such a sacrifice. And it offered hope to those who feared that duty and love were forever at odds, proving that both can be honored when hearts remain steadfast. In the end, theirs was not merely a tale of romance, but of victory, the victory of two souls who chose to grow, to trust, to forgive, and to walk forward with heads high and hearts open. A victory that did not declare one above the other, but both standing proudly together, equal in love and in life. And so their love endured, not as a fragile flame at risk of fading, but as a steady fire whose warmth reached beyond themselves, a love that inspired not only the two who shared it, but all who had the fortune to witness it. Thank you for sharing this journey of love, courage, and proud choices with me today. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a like. It truly means a lot. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss more inspiring English stories like this one. Share it with someone who could use a little hope and encouragement in their own path. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and always do yourself proud.